So as they deliberate, we are going to close out our formal programming today, and we turn to a story of innovation happening right here in Champaign-Urbana. Please welcome to the stage for our final panel this evening, Director of Entrepreneurship here at the University of Illinois, Gerald Wilson.
And I'm going to be having this conversation with Professor Kaiyu Guan. Is he in the room? Please come up. Excellent. All right, well, welcome back to the AgTech stage. It's good to have this conversation with you. So, an important part of our broader entrepreneurial ecosystem really is figuring out how we can transition technology that comes out of academic research into the marketplace. And an important player in that process is the faculty entrepreneur. The entrepreneurs who are willing and have the talent to think about how you actually take the steps to new venture formation, build a team, and grow that venture. And I think that very few exemplify that kind of faculty member, that kind of faculty innovator better than Professor Kaiyu Guan. So where I want to start, Kaiyu, is for those who are not familiar with your background, and HabiTerre, I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about what problem in the marketplace specifically HabiTerre was founded to solve, and who are your core customers?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, first, really appreciate the opportunity. I am very honored, but also very humbled. There are a lot of successful entrepreneurs in this campus, and so I'm just one of those people that working on things. So I'm very happy, and I'm very glad to share what I have experienced as a faculty member and also an entrepreneur. And so to directly respond to your question, I have two versions. The one version is what I see, HabiTerre. In my view, HabiTerre is really try to comprehensively accounting the agricultural impact from above ground, below ground, to really account for both the productivity side as well as the environmental attribution, environmental impact side. And so in other words, that our vision is really see we have the ability to really have able to monitor, model, and optimize every farmland in this planet. This is the founder's vision. And then when it goes to the company currently really target at the environmental GHG space for agriculture and the agri-food industry. And then with that being said, greenhouse gas emissions and as well as other related soil carbon and then N2O emission, and then just generally speaking, the carbon intensity attribution is an important industry problem. And then so a lot of the CPG companies, food companies, required to have these attributions with their product. And then at the same time, these attributions needs to be realized with farmers. And so we actually need these companies usually needs to work with farmers to ask them to make a practice change. And with all of that, there's a lot of the steps with farmers, with the transportation with middle layers, as well as ultimately it's the food companies. And so that whole chain of quantifying the attributions of the environment is very important, but currently it's very hard to do. And then so HabiTerre really make that process much easier by building this end-to-end solution that integrating a much better way to integrate with farmers' data, but also generating the very deep insights that will involve a lot of the deep science that we license from our university technology to the company. And then so for the CPG companies as well as these project developers that really accounting for the whole supply chain, these carbon intensity and carbon footprint.
Yeah, that's great. So, as I listen to you talk, right, you've outlined sort of a process of thinking about how you might leverage your research to solve a problem in the marketplace. It's often the case that faculty members might opt to potentially license that technology to someone else who might then leverage it within their own entity. Can you talk a little bit about why you decided to start a company to commercialize this technology yourself? And when you did start it, what's your perspective on timing? Was that the right time to start it? And how are you thinking about that today?
Yeah, sure. It really depends on the particular technology. And then the technology that I see we develop at both university lab as well as license to HabiTerre is a platform technology that I see. It's not a single specific ingredients or specific seed technology or specific innovation that you can easily license. Mm-hmm. We are building, I would say, really an aggregation of all kinds of algorithms, sensing technology, modeling capability, how we bring AI integrated with all that holistic framework. And then so with that being said, it's a lot of the IP that aggregating together. And then so from that perspective, licensing, dissect that can be hard. But also, what I also very value about is this holistic system level solution that we actually see, because I mentioned the vision that ultimately we want to use this technology to tackle every field possible in this planet. And then that aspiration really drive me to see if we build a platform technology can really have enormous power and potential. Can I be part of this throughout? I think that's just a very strong commitment or the thoughts very early on my mind. At the same time, the technology is not exactly mature to achieve at the global scale, I would say. We have achieved, at this moment, I can very confidently see every individual field level in the US Midwest or even heartland of the US, we have the ability to tackle that, kind of the environmental attribution for every farmland. But then go to the global, so it requires much more actual efforts, and how to do that even more so with different business models is still under exploration. So I'm thinking about the impact. I want to maximize the impact. So from that perspective, if I build a company that actually can realize that by itself instead of licensing that to others, it's a learning process. It's much more gratifying to see it's growing, the impact. Regarding timing, a lot of people tell me, you started at the wrong time. The answer that I have for everybody is that there's no perfect time too. And then so I would suggest to consider this is first whether your technology is very ready or not, like really ready or not, and then second is whether you do have a market or not. And I think for me, I would say the technology. I'm a little bit passive because I submitted my fourth IP application to OTM, our university IP office, and then basically the people who work with me in the OTM, Brad, say, how are you going to deal with all this IP? Because the university cannot pay for that all the time. And so you got to find a way. So that actually triggered me to think about, okay, either I should start a company or license. So that triggered that decision, I would say, really at that moment. Yeah.
So you mentioned the importance of understanding whether there's a market for what you're developing or not in making that transition. How confident were you of the market? That it does in fact exist, and how well did you feel like you understood it at the time you were thinking about getting this company started?
HabiTerre started not doing environmental like GHG, like carbon intensity, all this stuff. HabiTerre started by understanding and trying to predict the crop yield, and then we published a couple papers really advanced in doing that. But so then we actually, when the company initially started. Typical activity that any young startup company is talking to a lot of the potential use cases, talking to potential customers. We gradually realized that a lot of the ideals, a lot of the technology may not fit, or that particular market just hard to develop. And then I would say through a couple of, it's really the first 2 years is a lot of the try and error, and then understand, and also we have, I think the real transformative time is when we have our first CEO, actually Daphne is here, just really appreciate Daphne stepping and run the company for a period of time to really help us grow. And then at that time, we start to really get more focus and then understand the market much better. And then so I think that's the very pivot and a critical moment for the company, I would say. And later on, we have really started to be focused on the sustainability market of the food industry, and then and then we continue staying in this lane at this moment. Yeah.
Interesting. So I want to switch gears a little bit just to kind of hear a little bit more about your journey to this point, right? I've found in working with entrepreneurs that oftentimes, the entrepreneurial seed is kind of sown fairly early. And I wonder if for you, that is in fact the case. Had you always thought about starting a company, even within the context of your academic research?
I would say that the early education when I learned startup is when I was a graduate student. But then my postdoc period, which I did in the Bay Area, Stanford, that was quite an ecosystem. Let's put it this way. The Bay Area is different. When I talk to people there, seems everybody thinking about that startup. But I think it's more about thinking of how you maximize your impact. And I think the research program that I'm building inside the university, we are very blessed that we have a very big lab that we are getting grants to do major innovations. But while we are making these academic contributions to the science, to the engineering problems, if you also have the ability to bring some of these published work, published technology to generate a real world impact solution, that's definitely much more gratifying. So I see HabiTerre is a natural process of me thinking about to maximize the impact of the work that I've been doing.
Yeah. So maximizing the impact of the work you're doing by sort of taking, commercial pathway while also continuing your academic research. I'm wondering from your perspective, are there synergies between the two activities, and how does your understanding of how the technologies are being used in the marketplace, where the needs are, how does that inform how you approach your research?
Yeah, there's a lot of synergies. And then so first I want to make sure that the university has a very clear, the management plan to help faculty members to build a clear wall between your research activities and the entrepreneurial effort outside of university. And then this university is particularly good at that. I thank university for having this very mature system. Yeah. And second is the university does have a great our office of technology management, basically the university office to manage the IP. So they provide a lot of help to help me, thinking about how I should license the technology from the university for the startup, and then how to deal with all these, potential management. And then I would also attribute it to the university system in terms of where we are, the research park. The EnterpriseWorks give huge help in the early days of the startup of HabiTerre, and just huge gratitude about that, about our Laura, our old friends, and then just also the biggest champion for HabiTerre from the beginning till today, and then many other mentors like Kim and others give a lot of the support to me, to the company. So I have a lot of gratitude for this particular place. It makes Illinois very unique. It makes Illinois extremely unique. Yeah.
That's great. So you mentioned Daphne Pruce, who's in the audience, was critical in the early stages. Can you expand a little bit more on how you sort of made that transition to beginning to build the initial founding team, and how did that evolve over time? And were there things that you learned along the way that kind of led to changes that that were made as the company grew?
I would say the biggest thing that I want to say is there are so many things that let's put it this way: you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And that's the worst part. You don't know what you don't know, and then so. As a faculty member, you sort of know a lot of things, and you get into the business, it turns out that you know very little. I also want to make a point is you think business may be easy, in reality, it's different. It's very different from you doing the research. And I also want to make a point is maybe ultimately you can learn to do some business. You can be like a professor, and academia can do business, and then you can try very hard to learn. But what if you're directly working with a high caliber business person that collaborate with you to be your partners to build the business together? That actually is a significant difference, because you yourself understand your limit, and also understand like where you put the time and energy that you are most good at, while actually looking for the complementary strengths. And then I would say to build a business from university setting, or these startups, professors as a tech founder really needs to work with business founders. Or business partners in the very early days. And of course, who you work with matters a lot. In the ideal situation, work with the people who have a lot of industry experience, and then you can trust, and just be very willing to support you grow. And I'm very lucky to have Daphne, and I spent I think 1.5, close to 2 years with me, and then just really help the company move to a stage that definitely say, okay, now you're ready to raise a seed round and have a real CEO. I have a lot of gratitude about that. Very grateful. But also, I think, just for everybody's information, Daphne is we call it residence of entrepreneur, right?
EIR, entrepreneurial residence.
Yeah, thank you. We have like Daphne, other type of the similar, EIRs in the research park in our EnterpriseWorks that I encourage you to explore that. I think that would mean a lot. Another thing I want to bring up is I work also with a coach today. The coach. Some people may laugh because I remember the Silicon Valley, the sitcom, there's a coach. That was very amusing. I think I work with a real coach. And so he helped me navigate as a founder, and including my relationship with the team, and then how I perceive the bigger picture. And then I would say, have a good coach also help. And then I'm gonna recommend that coach to Laura. I think he's worth helping other companies in our ecosystem.
Yeah, that's good. So, in my experience and from working with other founders, whether the founder is the CEO or not, the role of the founder in a tech startup is really important, right? There's a certain level of intrinsic motivation there, a certain level of commitment and passion around the technology that is sometimes difficult to replicate in hired management. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about your role within the company and how, if at all, it's evolved over time.
Well, initially, you pretty much everything of your company.
Yeah.
And then gradually you evolve, and then also university have these rules like professors can only work 1 day of a week. So that pretty much limits you unless you have other arrangements. In my case, I have 1 day of a week. I'm not actually involved in the company day to day. So the company actually runs with its own team, and then we have the CEO, have CFO, CTO running the show. The team is working on that. But as of today, I set up the vision still, collaborating with the company leadership team. There's important decisions that we also make together in the boardroom. So I still play a critical, I would say, very engaged role into the company. And then it's also a critical moment of the HabiTerre, just for everybody's information. HabiTerre finished a A-round raise towards the end of 2024, and then with the lead investor, John Deere. And then so company is making very good progress. We are counting, for example, Tyson Food, General Mills as our major customers. So a lot of the major progress that happened and continue going to happen. And then I'm just very excited about continue this journey as my current role of shaping the company vision, and then having the strategic decisions still involved in making.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Now, I'd imagine, and perhaps hope that, we have some faculty members in the room who might be thinking about taking a similar journey. You've already touched on some of the resources that were really important for you as you were taking those steps. Are there other things you did, other things you want to highlight that might be important for prospective faculty founders to consider?
I actually have quite a few faculty friends that actually in the entrepreneurial world. I sometimes feel in the early day stage, if you make decisions and if you make the wrong decision, the impact is huge, especially in the early days. There are a lot of examples. I don't need to go into there. My suggestion is early on, find the right mentors that you trusted and with the industry, deep experience, gonna be very, very critical. Find the business partners that can actually really help you together build the business, gonna be very critical. University and then also the whole ecosystem has the program like ICOP and then Research Park and Enterprise have these similar facilities. And then so I encourage all the professor entrepreneurs to, before you make decisions and really talk to mentors, talk to the people, trusted people in this ecosystem to make sure you make the right decision.
Yeah.
I think that's very important.
Excellent. So I want to zoom out a little bit here as we start to sort of conclude our conversation here in just kind of reflecting on the ecosystem as a whole. You've already talked about EnterpriseWorks, the EIR program, ICOR, for example. These are all critical programs that kind of help with the steps that faculty entrepreneurs might take to new venture formation. What do you think, you have fairly unique kind of perspective, having started thinking about launching a new venture while you were still in California, in the Bay Area. What are your thoughts about where we can take this ecosystem to unlock additional faculty entrepreneurship?
This is a great question. Illinois is a really great place to start a company. And then because my company is AgTech, and so if you want to build a successful AgTech, if row crop, like corn soybean system is one of your major targets, I think you should be at the right place, and this is the right place for AgTech. And because of all these reasons, I also decided to stay. Yeah. And so I think it's very important. So the short answer is like go to the right place for the business. It's very, very important. But at the same time, as the whole world is much more, more and more connected. Like we have employees in Seattle, in Bay Area, in the East Coast, and then across the Midwest actually. So but we don't see actually the productivity actually compromised. Mm-hmm. So in other words, you can potentially build a company everywhere. And then, so make sure like you fully leverage that and then bring the talents to build the right company. Yeah, so that will be, some of my thoughts.
Great. So, I think I want to get your final thoughts on sort of your vision for where HabiTerre goes from here. So if we're back at AgTech 10 years from now having another conversation like this, what do you hope would have happened for the company by that point in time?
First, I hope HabiTerre is still there. That's very important.
Yeah, you got to stay in it to win it, right?
HabiTerre will be there, and then I also a deep believer that the whole land system, agriculture system should be both productive and environmentally sustainable. Like I deeply believe that. No matter what's the geopolitical or political reasons that currently have wings or all these reasons, I also deeply believe, choose is choose. Something cannot be changed. I'm a deep believer that sustainability is the future. And then with that being said, I believe that HabiTerre in 10 years will become the global standard infrastructure that embedded in all kinds of the agricultural supply chain and production system that provide the intelligence and then to empower both farmers as well as the agriculture industry to achieve the goal of both high productivity, high profitability, as well as highly environmental sustainable world.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I like that vision. Now, without sort of moving you off that path, I'm curious what you think about serial entrepreneurship and maybe something else down the line for you.
Yeah, as I mentioned, HabiTerre technology is a platform technology. It's not easy for me to start a second company, frankly speaking. So I put my bets on HabiTerre myself. I want it to be successful. I wanted it to be have a long-term lasting impact.
Yeah, love it. Excellent. Well, appreciate that. This has been a great conversation. Thank you for making the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gerald and Kaiyu. Again, another round of applause for our final fireside chat of the day. Absolutely wonderful. Another powerful example of research-driven entrepreneurship coming to life right here at Illinois.